Deve ser. Quer dizer que é? Uma? Uma.
Mas os outros 5 minutos antes de acabar.
Mas é para ir controlando até lá.
Eu vou dando 10.
E 15. Obrigado. Hello all, welcome to my talk about Kotlin. Before I start, just to have an idea, who develops in Kotlin? Anyone here? Okay. Who's a mobile developer? Who's really angry and wants to go to lunch? Okay, there's more people developing Kotlin. Nice. My name is Carlos Mota. I'm an Android tech lead at Tweet Software, and for the past 2 years, we've made a change to go to Kotlin. Okay, nice. I will have some code on my slides. It should be online right now. You can go to Speaker Deck and go to Kotlin my way in. This is a nice presentation about Kotlin. Nice, okay. Something that I really discovered for doing this presentation is I'm really, really good at doing memes. So you will see a couple of these over here. Let just this sink in. And let me start by talking about Kotlin, okay? I started this journey 4 years ago. I spent a couple of years trying to convince my company why we should make the switch. Thankfully, Google helped us. And okay, this is the first talk that I had with my management. I started, oh, did you heard about Kotlin? And he was like, Kotlin? And I was, no, Kotlin. Kotlin. No, Kotlin, the language developed by JetBrains. I never heard about Kotlin before. Okay, this is a strange word, but don't worry. Because I noticed that if you watch this video...
we're here to talk about Kotlin in production. My name is Christina Lee.
Okay, Christina Lee is from Pinterest, and she has amazing talks on Kotlin. And apparently, this is the translations that Google made, and it also... why is this important, okay? So Kotlin was announced first in 2011. In 2016, it was launched the version 1.0. And 4 years later, we have 1.3, okay? Why is this important? Java 5 was initially released in 2004, and in 2008, we have Java 8, okay? But if you look at Android evolution, we only have a small subset of Java 8 in 2016, where we already have Kotlin with almost a full set. And 2 years after, we also have Java 6, okay? So, while preparing for this talk, I noticed that this is really common now, and we should make a 10-year challenge. So, when we first started developing Android, there was that really, really small font, HTC Magic, ugly one with the UI all gray, and it used Java 5, okay, with 2 years delay. There was already Java 7. Now, one of the last phones is Pixel 3. We now have a subset of Java 8, and we have Kotlin 1.3.
Tyle keczupu Kotlin zmieści się na frytce. Tyle na kanapce. Tyle na burgerku. A tyle na żeberkach. O, a na szaszłyczku jeszcze więcej. Nie ma konserwantów, nie ma ograniczeń. Jesz tyle, ile się zmieści. Kotlin, I love ketchup.
This is not a joke, this exists, okay? Kotlin in Poland, it's like ketchup, okay? Also, it's an island, and supposedly Java was based on Java Coffee, Java Island, so Kotlin, it's a Russian island because JetBrains is from Russia. So what is Kotlin, okay? Kotlin runs on the JVM, it's developed by JetBrains, it's open source in 2011. Finally, it's supported and it's used by Google, by the entire Android team, okay? The new libraries are all made in Kotlin, and according to them, it's pretty smooth. But Kotlin is just not this one, okay? 2 talks before, we had Philip talking about Flutter. Flutter is amazing, okay? It can run all for 2 platforms, for instance, and you develop a single application. But it's a bit heavy if you compare it with Kotlin and running native, okay? Kotlin is way faster. The performance sometimes is even better than when you program in Java. It's also not just for Android, okay? You can do it server-side. You have Kotlin JS native, and you have now Kotlin multi-platform. Do it once, run it on everywhere. I should take this line. Worldwide adoption. If you search Kotlin on Google, we'll see a lot of companies talking about how they moved from Java to Kotlin. And 26, the CTO, 5 reasons why you moved to Kotlin. Jake Wharton, one of the main persons behind evangelizing Kotlin, as a Square Open Source, why Square Open Source love Kotlin. And 4 or 5 years ago, he written a document, a 20-page document, on why they should move to Kotlin, and this was 3 years before Google approved it. The Basecamp app, it's now 100% Android. On Reddit, on the Android app, you can see that Uber is already on Kotlin, Foursquare is already on Kotlin. And thankful to James Lau, that's from a guy from Google, 2 days ago, he sent a tweet that Kotlin is an official language for Android development inside Google, okay? Just this to give point that every code that are developing inside the Android team, it's made on Kotlin. If you go to the examples, they're all now on Kotlin. Sometimes they still have on Java, but the main code is Kotlin. All these companies are now, if not 100%, they are making the switch to Kotlin. So, I was looking for some stats. It's a fast-growing language on GitHub. On Stack Overflow, 75%, it's the most loved language, okay? It's the second one. And if you're, in the last talk we were talking about action on Google, it now has a library that has fully Kotlin. We built a client library entirely in Kotlin. We found Kotlin to be an expressive language with many features that allow you to implement your actions with safer code that is easier to maintain. We will see why Kotlin is way faster. Okay, there are 5 things that I think we can point out when we try to convince anyone on why we should use Kotlin. There are a lot of language features. It's concise, you do less code, it's easy to learn, it's 100% interoperable with Java, meaning that if you have something in Java, it will run on Kotlin, and vice versa. And it has a big growing community. So let's talk about language features. I decided to select the features that I use daily. Okay, this is not an easy task because there are a lot of them, but this is the ones that I think they are the main ones. So let's talk about mutability. When I'm talking about mutability, I mean sometimes we have a variable and we thought that it was immutable, and then it's mutable and you have some threads that change that value and shouldn't change, and we have crashes or unwanted behaviors. So in Kotlin you have a really cool thing that's called Vowel, and we have vars, and Vowel means that variable it's immutable, meaning that if you have Vowel answer equals 42, okay, this means that this is an integer, and then if you try to put it in 100, the compiler will say that Vowel cannot be reassigned, okay? The compiler warns you before you can compile it and lose time seeing why something does not work. So for that, we have var. Basically, val means value and var means variable. So you can see here that I created an object called life, and I access one property that's called answer, and it said that it was 42, okay? I can shorten this code up because Kotlin has type inference, meaning I don't need to define the type life because he knows what that variable is going to be. If the variable is 42, he'll understand that the type is an int, but then if I said it is a long, once again, the compiler will warn me that, okay, this is a long, and you declare it as an int. String interpolation, okay. In Java, to do this, it's a really, really dull task. You have to close brackets, put a plus, open brackets again, put your text, close brackets, plus, insert a plus sign, etc. Here, we can just do something like we put a semicolon before, and you can have everything in line. If you want to make some sort of operation, you just need to put the curly brackets. Another cool thing here, it's called default values, okay? if you want to, let's say that you have one method, but these values can have default here. So if you want to call a method, you have to have three different ones, okay? Because, compute needs 42. On Kotlin, we can just call them directly with a single method, meaning that if you receive this value, you'll use 42 by default, okay? You don't need, when calling it, to send all the parameters for that method. Another cool thing here, it's basically a when, it's a pretty if else, if else, if else. You can just see the answer here and check, okay, if it's one, do this, if it's two, do this, if it's more than one value, if it's a range, if it's a string, do something else. I talked about this image before, okay? Null pointer exceptions. This happens quite often. Probably it's the most common crash we have on our applications because we forget that something could be null, we didn't make a check, and this happened, okay? Kotlin is, I won't say 100% because there is always that small chance that it can something crash with a null pointer, but it's null safety by default. Yay! Meaning that if I have something that's a variable, for instance, and I say that it's type string, and I say that it will be null, the compiler will say null cannot be a value of a non-null type string, meaning that that variable cannot never be null. Okay? Types are non-null by default. What if I want to say that that variable can be null? You should never do this, but for some reason we have Java, where if you need for that variable to be null, that's easy. You just need to put that safe ancestor, okay? And it then will compile and will output a null value. You can do other things with this. For instance, this is called an evangelise operator. And it's like, okay, if this is null, do this. Another cool thing, we have a lot of methods that the language gives us. That's this one, let, that I can say if result, basically this says if result is not null, run this. There is other collection that we can use, okay? And you will see that this is really, really cool because it takes us a lot of code from our hands. For instance, let's say that we have this mutable list. First, we have this mutable list, and we have list of, okay? Mutable lists means that you can add more objects, okay? It's mutable. Immutable list, like list of, if you try to add another one, okay, it will not work. Let's see this example. We have a mutable list of 1, null, 2, null, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8, okay? We output this, and it will print this. But we can do something like, just out of the box, we don't need to create any for, and make if not null. No, Kotlin has that for you. You can just call filter not null, and it will output everything without the null. We can say that we want model 2 to outprint only the pairs, and it will output 2, 4, 6, 8. And we can even call sort descending to reverse the list. Okay? You can do everything with this, with Kotlin, with only calling one method. You don't need to create fors, conditions, nothing. Kotlin is really concise. If Jeff Atwood, it's the creator of Stack, or one of the co-founders of Stack Overflow, and it runs Coding Hour. He has a really good code. That's the best code is no code, meaning, okay, if you have less code, you will have less errors because you have less lines. And Kotlin is really good on this. Let's see this example. Let's imagine we have a class called conference, okay? This is an entity, okay? We have a lot of methods over here, getters, setters, everything, okay? On Kotlin, we have this. When it compiles, it will automatically generate getters, setters, hash code, everything that you're going to need. So we will go 60 lines of Java code into a single line of Kotlin. A common thing that we usually do on Android, okay, we have views and we have to have actions on them. So what we do is we find the view by ID, we add the ID, we have a click listener, we add a view, we override it on click. What for? Okay, but we have to do a lot of code to do this. So on Kotlin, we can do something like this. You have find by ID, you say the type of that ID, and you just send the set on click listener. You can see if we compare with this one that we lost a view, no problem. If you need it, just add it here, okay? But if you're not going to use it, you can just remove it. But we can do better. We used to have a library that was called Butterknife that basically created a direct access to the view without having to call every time find view by ID. What you do is on top of the class, you declare that ID, and it automatically in compile time will make that match. It will create an annotation that it's capable to read from your XML file. Okay, in Kotlin, this is outside of the box because you can just do the ID that we have there, set on click listener, okay? You just need to add this on your Gradle file, and this is the way that you create a click listener on a button, okay? Let's see. 2 lines, cross 7. Let's see another example. We have a class that extends button. We want to create a special type of button. If we try to extend a button, we always have to declare these 3 methods, okay? What this means is they're going to send default values to, the super will have default values to call the other ones, meaning, let's see this one, it will send com.android.internal.r button style, okay? And it will send other parameter as null. In Kotlin, we can just override the constructor with the default values that I've mentioned previously and have this, okay? We're saying here that we're going to overload the constructor and we'll send these default values, null and com.android button style. And with a single line, we'll have the same method, okay? This is pretty cool and saves you a lot of time. Another cool thing is if you want to implement on Kotlin, now there is a thing called Android extensions. It's still not on a final version. You have to put experimental through, but it works really, really smooth. Okay, you just need to add annotation parcelize, say that this class will extend parsable, and everything will be done by itself. You don't need to do anything. So less bugs, more free time, and happier team and management. Okay? And you can do a lot of other things, like giving talks. So Kotlin is really easy to learn, okay? There is a really small curve involved, and it's easily go from JavaScript, and especially from Swift to Kotlin. If you put the language side by side, you'll see they're really, really similar. Let's see, on Kotlin, we have that variable field, that's meaning that I can change it, and we have the val. On Swift, we have the var, but the val, instead of calling val value, it's called let. It's the same thing as the same purpose, just different naming. If you want to have to declare a type, you can just on Kotlin you use val, for instance, and you say that's type double, and you associate it. Of course, as we saw before, you can just remove double, and it will see that it's a double because we have type inference on Kotlin. On Swift is the same thing, and you can just define it as a double, and you have to call it let. Public void greet, here you have fun, okay? Or meaning public string greet, and here we have fun that returns string. On Swift, what we have, it's a func. We have to put the other dash before, and we have to say the type. On Kotlin is 2 points, and here it's an arrow. And when we want to return type on Kotlin, you can just use the suffering, and here you have to put a backslash and then end parentheses. Talking about classes, we have the same difference over here. You just need to have the func. And how to use a class, it's the same thing, okay? There is no difference between Kotlin and Swift. So the goal here is to create 2 really similar languages that take the advantages of the most common language out there. And when you know one, you basically almost know the other. So it's so probable with Java. There are some annotations that you need to follow if you're still using Java. JVM static that to say that you need to generate getters and setters, overload to overload the constructors, for instance, and the JVM fields saying that you don't need to generate the getters and setters for that particular field. Another cool thing, Kotlin has a big growing community. It has a lot of documentations out there. You have Kotlin Lang website with a really lot of articles, of talks, of examples. You can compile the code online. It's internally used by Android team, and it's really being pushed forward by Google, JetBrains, and the Android community. So I told you that I was really good at making memes. This is Android life right now. Wololooo, 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 wololooo. So, we have a pretty cool new language, I'm convinced. Now comes the worst part. How are you going to convince others? Okay? So basically, this is the story of my life. I don't felt from a building, but it was almost there. I started to try to push Kotlin 4 years ago, and the first 2 years were particularly difficult. First, because there was no way to know if Google would accept Kotlin or not as the main language, and at the time there was some talks with a JIT compiler that Kotlin won't be able to use it or won't be as performance as it should be, and they were developing and what would be the future. Fortunately, they embraced it. So the talk, this was my first talk, okay? So I started by, this was pre-Google I/O, and I think you will know how it went, right? So this was something like this. Hey, do you hear about Kotlin? No way. What's that? Cool new language, it was developed by JetBrains, have a lot of cool things, we should use it on our project. Does Google support it? Not yet, no. It was a big no, you shouldn't use it, okay? But I tried to push it, I make some presentations, and on 2017, Google said, okay, we'll now support Kotlin. So this was my second time, or one other time I tried to push it. So if at first don't succeed, let's call it version 1.0. Does Google support it? Yeah! It's not safe, it has smart cast, lambdas, all the technical stuff that only a couple of people on the team understand, not the management. But I sure will motivate the team, it will improve productivity, it's really concise, everything cool. Oops. Yeah, it was really cool. I still have no answer to that email that I sent with the cool things. So I tried a different approach, okay? I was using the talk that I have with my colleagues. I tried to show them why that was cool. And this conversation sometimes didn't work with my colleagues also, because we have to think that people are used to Java. There are people that are developing in Java for more than 10 years. And I'm asking them that they need to make a switch to Kotlin, a new language that, although you can have a small learning curve, truth to be said, you know a lot of Java, you know all the edge cases, you know how a specific method will behave, you know a lot of things. So I decided 2 years ago to make a different approach. Kotlin my way in. So the first thing that I decided it was to try to understand if there was a community in Portugal, okay? Mainly in Coimbra to see who was using it. I discovered there was a company called All19 that was using in Lisbon. And I decided to talk with them to understand what was their point of view. They were using for a couple of months and try to understand, okay, are you happy with Kotlin? No? Okay. What would you change? How would you take that approach? So this is a really brief workflow on how it started. I started to see if there was a local community on my hometown. There was none related with Kotlin. So we basically decided to, I'm from GDG Coimbra also, and we decided to start to organize talks related with Kotlin to see if we can have mass adoptance inside the community. A couple of months ago, me and some friends decided to create Android PT Slack, and we've been talking a lot about Kotlin. And of course, we have an amazing Slack that's called Kotlin Lang with, you should mute it because they're always talking over there. The good thing about the community is that you can meet other people that are enthusiastic, you can discuss ideas, and we're talking about a new language, and it's mainly used on the US, so it's really good to talk with a lot of people about this. So then I had to have a talk with my team, and this was the first answer that I get. Why would I want to learn a language if I can do my daily tasks with Java? And I still heard this a couple of times. I remember that I was giving an internal tech talk while I was trying to push Kotlin, and I made that talk in half an hour, and then we spent 1 hour discussing why we should move to Kotlin, and people are really, really against it, because this means that, once again, you have to put an extra effort to learn a new language and do things differently. The cool thing here is when you make a comparison between Java and code is that you can, my goal here when we started to make these tech talks internally was to show them, as I've done here, show how you can gain when you pass to Kotlin. You really write less lines of code, okay? It's really faster to develop. And thanks to null safety and mutability, you have a lot of less crashes, and you have an happier QA team. And once again, if you can do things faster, you have a lot more time to push other things forward. Another thing that I advise is we should start small, okay? When we start to be enthusiastic about something, we always tend to want to do everything, okay? So if your application is gigantic, the next step, oh, let's refactor everything. No, we have to start small. If someone wants to keep with Java, there's no problem with it. We need to have some special cares, but as you saw before, we have those JVM annotations that you can use, and you can do the code that runs perfectly both on Kotlin and on Java. A thing that it's important to keep in mind is that teams are made by diverse people, so we'll have a lot of different opinions here. Not everyone will share your enthusiasm. I don't understand why, but this happens. And once again, people are used to Java, and learning a new language requires time and effort. Now the third point here is you have to convince the management. And this is also not an easy task to do, because once again, we start talking about how that language is really, really cool. And you cannot have that approach, because for them, okay, but you can do similar things with Java. So you have to, instead of saying, no safety, smart cards, everything, no. This happens. I have no idea what you're talking. That's too much words for me to understand. You have to talk with them saying, okay, if you make the change to Kotlin, we'll have a more stable application. Okay, you will have less crashes. You have, in the end, will also can be translated to your users will be happier, your client will be happier, and the development and bug fixing phases will be really, really smaller. So you'll have other time for features. Features that, in turn, will be done faster, and these will improve team motivation. And in the end, since you can always go back to Java, and you can do this independently, and it's interoperable, you have a low risk on doing this. So how we've done it. It's worth to mention that this project has more than 7 years. So this means that I have a lot of lines of code. So we don't change things from one day to the other, not even 1 year to the other, because we always have legacy code that we need to maintain. So what we decided, some more stats. We don't have that much code coverage. There are 14 developers. There's always time restrictions, and the only people that really wanted to go forward to Kotlin was me. And we are 14, so I had a really difficult task here. But what I've done was, first, I tried to understand the risk, what that meant. Okay, I made a lot of tests, trying to see that if when we made the switch to Kotlin, how will the compile time will increase, will decrease, how will be the performance. There is a really cool feature that on Android Studio you can convert automatically the code from Java to Kotlin. Okay, this is particularly important on the beginning. It helps you understand how things will work on Kotlin. I made a lot of POCs. I started by doing tests on Kotlin, so I tried to improve the coverage of tests that we had, and then tried to measure developer time against productivity. That's on the beginning, it's not the biggest one, but in the end it will always be bigger than Java. Once again, really good at doing memes. So what we've done, we decided to start from fresh. Instead of changing code already done, we had a new feature, and we decided that feature would be done in Kotlin, only on Kotlin. So we are a team of 2 developers doing that specific feature, and we have a reviewer for redundancy. So if there was any problem or something that one of us didn't agree with, there was only a third person that could say, oh no, you're right. No, you are. And this also allows us to see how would Kotlin behave with external features. For instance, green DAO, that fortunately it's no longer on our project because we now have room, behaves really, really bad with Kotlin. It was the only problem that we found, that on Kotlin, since green DAO also uses annotations, it wasn't able to make the match with the Kotlin data class. Okay, how did we solve that problem? Okay, that class will be on Java. So we had an entire model on Kotlin and a single class on Java thanks to green DAO. These codes are from after that feature was done. I had the other team member that was with me said that we should all refactor the application because Kotlin was great. It's smart enough to detect errors, as we saw on the compiler warn us a lot before it compiled. Another cool thing, this is most recently, that I had a colleague that was fixing initial on a class, and then he decided to change that old class to Kotlin because it will be shorter lines and it will solve several bugs. Many years turning chickens, great success with Kotlin. So our stats nowadays, 32% of this project is now on Kotlin, and 58% of the new features are made with Kotlin. We are a team of 16, 17. 67% of these people are now developing fully on Kotlin, and we still have people developing on Java. From time to time, we hear, okay, I don't know what this class on Kotlin does, but I would say that this happens 1 time a month, for instance, and we try to have a special care when we develop in Kotlin to don't put everything in line, to think that there are people in Java and they need to understand what the code is. We have, of course, some upcoming challenges. For instance, Kotlin is amazing, but it's a bit, there are now 2 coding conventions, but we still, who's developing defines the coding conventions. This is something that we want to improve because what's right for me won't be right for you. And on the end of the project, we will see different types of ways of doing things, and sometimes not the best ones to be readable. There's still a big code base, so for now it doesn't justify to push everything to Kotlin. We want to keep moving forward, doing still new features in Kotlin, and we want to improve the onboarding process, meaning that if someone on the team wants to start to develop in Kotlin, to have more internal tech talks on how they can do this and reduce that learning curve. There are a lot of really good resources, okay? Untitled Portugal Slack, the Kotlin official training, and Jake Wharton and Tony Live. There are really good recommendations. So, questions? I still have one question, two questions.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you. And, hold on. So we have time for 1-2 quick questions. So questions, anyone? One there.
What about the documentation generation, like Java doc? Is there something in Kotlin? Can you elaborate on this? Actually, more generic question. It's not about the development, but more about the supporting the already written code. Like, if it's not documentation, maybe there is other perks which worth to mention.
Sorry, can you
Code
repeat?
maintenance, like you were mostly comparing two languages, motivating that it's much more easier to write a new code in Kotlin, right? What about maintaining the existing code? It would be easier as well comparing to Java, or it would be harder? What do you think about that?
In my opinion, it would be easier. And okay, so we adopted Kotlin 2 years ago. I believe it was 1.12, and we're now on 1.3. The cool thing, once again, about this, it's that compiler gives you a lot of information. We now we have lint warnings, and we start now to have lint related with Kotlin. So what happens now, it's when we make an upgrade to a new Kotlin language, we have that specific lint warnings to warn us for if anything has changes, anything was improved. And of course, we made some changes, but was only to improve that code. Meaning that there was new functions available that were more efficient, and we compiled the project, and basically lint warned us that we could make that move to replace that function by another one. Talking about issues, of course, we're developing and there are always issues. I would say that people that are already familiarly with Kotlin can solve the issue with no problem. People that are still using Java and for some reason needs to change something on Kotlin, they have a bit of difficulty because although it's more readable, it's less verbose, and sometimes we try to do everything in a single line because Kotlin allows us to do this. We have things like let that, although you get to understand what it makes, and if else it's more clear. So sometimes we have to make small explanations on how something is made. But so far, and there are people here on the audience, I think that there was no problem and everyone is still on board with Kotlin and no upcoming challenge on maintenance.
And you can generate documentation automatically like Javadoc, or?
Okay, that's a bit different because on Java you have Javadoc. On Kotlin you have a different one that I'm not currently remember the name. Exactly, thank you. We've faced some problems now because what I wanted to do was to merge everything. And I believe at least I tested this 2 months ago and I didn't find a way to merge all the documents together. So currently we have Javadoc and we have KDoc. So, but this is on our roadmap to merge everything together.
Would you use that translation, IDE translation that you mentioned, like from Java to Kotlin? Would you use it for real projects, or you would just use it for demonstration, motivating the management?
No, now you can use it on my team, but on the early stage when we start developing, you could use it. Basically because, okay, you're used to Java. Only Java 8 now has lambdas, for instance, but we're not used to it on Java 7. So it helps us to understand a bit how things would be put together. On the beginning, it's a real advantage to have that, but you shouldn't trust it because it simply looks, okay, this is for each, you can change it by a filter, for instance. So it's not as optimized as if you do that method yourself. So it's good to learn, but it's not good to just convert it and push it on the project.
Cool. So, thank you once again to Carlos. Yeah.